The night came down slow over the ranch, the kind of quiet that pressed against the ears until even a breath sounded loud. And she stood there, in the doorway of the barn with her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, eyes shining with a fear she hadn't spoken out loud in years. Because this town had already decided who she was, a lonely woman, whispered about, pitied, never chosen, while he stood a few steps away, boots dusty, hands rough from honest work, a rancher who carried his own scars in silence. And when she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than air. "Shh, I need to feel safe." And he understood it wasn't just a request. It was a confession, a surrender of pride. And the barn seemed to hold its breath as he stepped closer, not touching her at first, only meeting her eyes with a steadiness no one had ever given her before. And in that moment she realized she wasn't asking for passion alone. She was asking to be seen. And he gave her that before anything else. His coat placed around her shoulders, his presence firm and protective, the world outside fading as the lantern light softened their shadows into one. And whatever passed between them afterward was not rushed or stolen, but careful, tender, the kind of closeness that heals old wounds instead of opening new ones. And when dawn finally crept in through the cracks of the barn boards, she rested her head against his chest, not in shame but in quiet disbelief, because for the first time in her life, she did not feel like something borrowed or hidden. She felt chosen, and the rancher, staring out at the waking land, knew this night had already changed more than either of them dared to say aloud. And if you feel stories like this pulling at your heart, stories of redemption, love, and second chances, this is the moment to subscribe, because every story on this channel is built to stay with you long after the screen goes. Dark mourning brought consequences, because in towns like this, nothing stayed secret for long, and the looks followed her through the street, sharp and knowing, while he rode beside her, not touching, not explaining, only present. And when the rumors finally reached him, twisted words, cruel laughter, he did something no one expected. He stopped in front of the church, dismounted, and spoke loud enough for the town to hear, not defending himself, not denying anything, but claiming her with a calm certainty that stunned even her, saying that what happened was not shameful, not temporary, and not without intention. And in that moment, she understood the truth behind the night they shared, that it had never been about secrecy, it had been about beginning. And when he took her hand in front of everyone, the silence that followed was heavier than any insult, because the rancher was not a man who acted without purpose. And weeks later, as the land turned gold and the house filled with light and work and shared meals, she learned what it meant to be a wife in more than name, a partner, a woman whose past no longer defined her future. And the town slowly adjusted, because it had no choice. And love like that does not ask permission. It reshapes the world around it. And as she stood beside him at sunset, ring warm on her finger, she realized the moment she whispered in the barn had not been weakness but courage. And his answer had not been desire alone but commitment. And if this story moved you, if you believe in love that rises from silence into strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the next story might be the one that reminds you that no matter how the world labels you, your ending is still yours to choose. Marriage did not quiet the past. It challenged it, and the ranch learned quickly that love does not end gossip. It exposes it, because the same people who once whispered now watched her closely, waiting for a mistake, a crack, some proof that she did not belong beside a man like him. But the rancher never wavered, not when business partners tested him, not when old friends questioned his choice, and certainly not when the town preacher hinted that passion fades faster than respect. Because what they did not understand was that what bound them was not a single night, but 1,000 quiet decisions made every morning, his hand finding hers before the sun rose, her presence steadying the house he had lived in alone for too long. And when hardship struck, as it always does, it struck hard, with a storm that tore fences apart and threatened the herd. And in the chaos, she did not wait inside like the town expected. She rode out with him, mud on her dress, fear in her chest, but resolve stronger than both. And when she stood beside him in the rain, refusing to leave, the rancher saw not the woman the town once judged, but the partner fate had been shaping all along. And when they returned at dawn, exhausted and soaked, Laughter broke through the tension like sunlight, and in that laughter, something settled permanently between them, a bond tested and proven. And if you believe the strongest, love stories are forged, not in comfort but in storms, then this is your reminder to subscribe, because every story here is about love that stands when everything else falls away. Time passed, and with it came a quiet respect the town could no longer deny, because prosperity followed the ranch, and with it a change no one had predicted. She became the woman others came to for advice, for help, for understanding, not because she demanded it, but because resilience recognizes resilience. And when a young woman arrived one evening, frightened and judged the same way she once had been, she opened the door without hesitation, offering warmth, safety, and words she had once needed herself. And the rancher watched this from the doorway, understanding fully now that the night in the barn had not simply given him a wife, it had given him a future richer than land or cattle could ever provide. And when he stood beside her years later, the ranch alive with voices and work and purpose, he knew the world had tried to define her once and failed. Because love, when it is real, does not erase the past, it redeems it. And as the sun dipped low and she leaned into him, content and unafraid, he whispered a promise not of passion but of forever. And if this story touched you, if you believe in endings that heal instead of break, don't let this be where your journey stops. Subscribe to the channel, because the next story may remind you that no matter how quietly love begins, it can still change everything. The final test did not arrive with noise or violence, but with choice. Because the truest measure of love is revealed not when the world is watching, but when sacrifice is required in silence, and when the rancher was offered a chance to expand his land, more power, more wealth, more respect, at the cost of leaving for months at a time. It was she who saw the hesitation in his eyes before he spoke it, understanding that the man who once lived only for work now lived, for what they had built together. And when he chose to stay, to invest not in distant promises but in the life before him, something irreversible settled into the foundation of the ranch, a truth stronger than vows. And years later, when the land passed to steady hands and the house echoed with the quiet of fulfilled days rather than loneliness, she stood where she once had whispered in fear and smiled at the memory, because the moment that began with shh had become a lifetime spoken boldly, and the town that once judged now told their story as proof that love does not come to the flawless, it comes to the brave. And as the sun set behind the fields and he wrapped an arm around her, the world finally felt whole. And if this journey moved you, if you believe that love can rise from silence into forever, then don't let this be the end. Subscribe to the channel, because every story here is a reminder that no matter where you begin, your ending can still be powerful.